Hello, everyone. This is yet another episode of Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. And in these conversations, we talk with professionals with very interesting careers who share their life hacks and tips of how to develop a successful career with us. And today I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jonathan Weitzman. Jonathan is a full professor of genetics at the Université de Paris and the founding director at the Center for Epigenetics and Cell-Fate. He trained at the University of Manchester and the University of Oxford, UK. He worked at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at the Harvard Medical School and was a faculty member at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. Jonathan has a background in signal transduction pathways and expertise in gene regulatory networks and epigenetic contributions to disease. He has authored over 60 research articles and reviews and published 2 books for a lay audience. Jonathan is also passionate about teaching and is heavily committed to training and mentoring young researchers. He directs the European Masters in Genetics at the Université de Paris and the École Universitaire de Recherche Gene. Jonathan also led many interdisciplinary initiatives, and currently he is the co-host of the podcast The Lonely Pipette, helping scientists to do better. Great to have you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And now I would like to give a floor to you so that we can hear your story told from your own perspective.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalia. Thanks for the invitation. So as you said, I have a long academic career. So I did a PhD in molecular biology, a postdoc in the States. I guess that's the first surprise, is that a lot of your career depends on what happens in your personal life. So I met a woman in the States, and she was French. And so I came to France. This was not part of the plan, but being in science was very easy for me to travel. So we wanted to come back to Europe, and doing a second postdoc was just an easy step. So I went to do a second postdoc at the Pasteur Institute. One of the great things about being a scientist is the ability to move from one country to the other. But it's very challenging professionally because I didn't speak any French, and I didn't understand the system. It took me a long time in France to survive in academia. It takes a long time to understand the system. But eventually I got a permanent job at the Pasteur Institute. And then recently, about 12 years ago, switched from the Pasteur Institute, which is a private research institute, to the university, which is a public structure. And there I started teaching. Actually, I hadn't taught before, but I started to be a teacher and professor. And I had the opportunity to set up this new institute and to do lots of new projects. So that's a sort of linear, makes it look very linear, very easy. It wasn't that linear, and it wasn't that easy. Often your CV makes it look like everything was simple and everything was logical, but that's not the way careers happen. So there were several points. There are lots of things that are not on my CV, points where I went to explore other things and test other things, either because of curiosity or because of frustration. And so we can talk about those. We can talk about those as you want. And now I help a lot of students. I run a master's program in genetics, but it's very research orientated. But we're very aware that many of our students will not end up in lab research in the public sector. So we're trying to think more and more how to help students transition using science as a start, but transition into lots of other careers. And I feel very, very strongly that the most interesting things in life are where our interfaces. So it's at the interface between two things, between black and white, that you get gray, and gray is much more interesting than black or white. And it's at those interface careers that I think lots of our students will play interesting roles. So science and business, science and media, science and law. There are many interface professions where having two skill sets and the ability to talk to two communities can really give you some valeur ajoutée, an added value, and really make an interesting career. And so, and the times when I've stepped out of academia and left this sort of linear path have been to interact with business, with media, with journalism, with other fields. And a lot of my research actually involves interaction with other disciplines. So I'm really convinced that when you step off a linear path, that's when it becomes interesting. Scary, but interesting.
Actually, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I think we know, like, history basically tells us that this is true. I mean, one of the biggest biggest breakthroughs in technology and also in the history came from merging two disciplines together. Like, even Steve Jobs, like, what did he do? What he did was basically bringing arts to the IT industry and proving that computers can be beautiful. And he
So tomorrow I'm teaching a class. I have a new teaching module that I've been running for a few years, which is at the intersection between art and science. So we have an artist in residence who comes in, and students from l'École des Beaux-Arts, and my students from genetics, and it's about exploring what happens. It's not about learning to paint or something like that. It's about exploring what happens when very different approaches interface and meet each other, and that encounter. So I think it is true. You know, in the Renaissance, you had people like Leonardo da Vinci, who was an artist and an engineer and a physiologist, and unfortunately, we've separated all these disciplines into separate buildings. And a large part of my career has been really invested in breaking down these building barriers and trying to create bridges in an academic sense, but also outside of academia.
Fantastic. Yeah, actually, I went the entrepreneurial path, so I can speak. I mean, I know the most about this one because I know it from my own experience. But I can see that researchers have their edge as entrepreneurs, definitely, because merging this ability to think logically and plan ahead and diligently executing projects is a big edge in business, I think. And I can see that also now in the crisis. So actually, recently I talked to a few friends who also have businesses, and like, we talked for the first time since a few months. So since basically the crisis broke out, and I can see how much I was able to do, and also friends who hold PhDs, and how well we were organized and planned for this year despite the crisis, and we could just proceed with our plans and test new solutions and build our products.
Yeah, I do agree. Scientists, well-trained scientists, should be ready for anything, because science is supposed to be about surprise, and you're not supposed to know where you're going. You're supposed to be able to react to the data and to what you discover and the things that don't work. And most experiments don't work. So,
Right.
um,
Right, and actually, we never have a comfort zone. We never have good times. There are always bad times. If you, especially if you don't have a 10-year contract, then you always are like in the shadow of failure because your contract is short. So you will eventually.
failure is not bad. Failure is that's where you learn.
Yeah.
That's where you learn. That's where you make innovation comes from failure. You quote Steve Jobs. He was thrown out of his own company, and then he comes back. So
Yeah.
I think so I teach a class. I've been teaching since I came to university. I created a new class which is called Recherche et Développement en Entreprise, which is about so our students have this very serious heavy genetics, very intense genetics program. And then Tuesday afternoons, we have this class, and we explore, it's the only place where we explore other careers. We talk about intellectual property, we talk about marketing, we talk about, we go and visit biotechs, and a lot of our students come back and present their experiences. And when so the students are very seduced by listening to entrepreneurs tell about creating a company and what it's like to run a startup. But when I listen to them, often it sounds like they're describing what it is to run a lab. So a lab is a small company. It has a budget, it needs to have funding, it has products, whatever they are. It has human resource questions, it has strategic questions, collaborative questions. So running a lab it's not just about the science, it's about all the complexity of running this small business. And a lot of the skills are similar. So I think I actually saw someone on Twitter who's an academic describes themselves as, I run a small business that produces papers in international journals. So that's what I do. I run a small business, which is called a lab.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like, it's also very important part of it is to choose the right people and then motivate them. And I think this is the key to succeed with the lab, and the same
Yeah.
with the business.
And I mean, as an entrepreneur, you know, a lot of the experiences of entrepreneurs in small companies is that you need to be multitasker. The job of a scientist involves lots and lots of multitasking, often things that you're not really well prepared for. And sometimes the smaller the lab, just like the smaller the company, the more things you do. So I was also involved. So I left academia once as a postdoc to work for a small company. It was a startup, and they hired me because of my strong academic and scientific background. But when you're in a small company, you get involved in doing lots of things. And you learn lots of things.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, I hear a lot from people working in startups that they are quite drained after some time. It's indeed very intensive. And actually, I myself also had a episode in a startup maybe 10 years ago. I was intern for a month in a neuromarketing company, so I could see how it looks. And indeed, it was very intensive. So I can imagine.
Yeah.
But actually, tell us a little bit more about these experiences. As you mentioned before, that on multiple occasions you experimented with industry life and still came back to academia. So, what made you an addict to academia? Why did you come back every time? And yeah, and what kind of experiences did you have outside academia?
That's a why did I come back? So that's really hard to answer. I guess at the end of the day, it's my calling. This is where I've had the most fun. I think it's really important for me. So I mean, I do like you use the word. I guess I must have used it. So you picked up on the word experimenting, and I think careers are not something that you plan. They're something that you experiment, that you learn as you go, and you can't know. No one can sit down and say this is who I am, and therefore this is the job I should be doing. You need to test, and you need to take a scientific approach. So a scientific approach is you look carefully at the information, you make sure that you're well informed, and then at the end of the day, the only way to test is to do the experiment. So I took a rather experimental approach, and to test how I was in different environments, and the contribution I could make in different environments. I also took some time to travel, which is not on my CV. And this is really an important message I have for students, is that your CV is just a piece of paper that you use for a purpose, which is to get an interview. And it doesn't have to be a catalogue of everything you've ever done in life. So if you want to put down that you traveled around the world, you put it down. And if you just feel that it's not appropriate, so you don't put it down. So twice I took a year off to travel, which was very enriching. I just feel it's not appropriate for most of the jobs I've applied for. So it just isn't on my CV. But I have at least 2 years off that I did traveling. One before I went to university, and one between postdocs. So then I also, as a postdoc, I got very frustrated, and because I didn't know what my future, whether I had a future in academia, and when you lose the knack, when you lose the spirit this job is not much fun. Doing experiments when you really lose the excitement of that, it's badly paid, the hours are long, and most things don't work. So I just felt I needed to do something else. I didn't know whether I would come back or not, but I did feel like I needed to do something else. One of the times that I left was to work for a company. I had an idea about it was at the time of the internet bubble, and I had an idea myself about creating a B2B platform for the life sciences. And I had started to work on this project, and then I saw a job advert for a job to work in a B2B for the life sciences. So I realized that they were ahead of me. So I applied for the job and went to work with them. It was all the excitement of the internet. It was, and at that time you had to roll out in across Europe. So we were in all countries at the same time, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. But these small companies, at the time, they grew very, very quickly, and then they shrank very, very quickly. And when I could see that things were not so good, and they started to lay people off, I actually resigned and worked for them as a consultant for a while. And then I needed a job, so I went back to the lab, amazingly. And because it was relatively small amount of time, it was a year that I was away. So a year on a CV can disappear. And my boss really believed in me. So he took me back. And as long as you can find money to come back, you can come back if it's a small period. So I learned a lot. I doubled my career. I doubled my salary. And then I halved it again when I came back. And I had a family, so I needed a salary and I needed some security. So I came back to the lab and actually was very successful in the lab, and everything worked. Another time I didn't actually leave, but I had so a lot of scientists, maybe it's not the case today, but 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, when I was a postdoc, lots of people thought that if they didn't succeed in science, they could always write. And scientists think that they write well, and that you can always become an editor or a journalist or science writer. Maybe, do you meet a lot of people who say that? Lots of people think that. So I remember my father had come to visit me in Paris, and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, if I don't get a job, maybe I'm going to be I'll become a science writer." And he said, "Well, have you ever written anything?" I said, "No, but I can write. I'm a scientist." And he said, "Well, why don't you actually write something?" And I'd done a lot of academic writing in the lab, but I hadn't written for a non-academic audience. So I had an opportunity. The head of the lab had a paper to review for Nature, and he didn't have time, so he asked me to help him review the article, and it was a very important landmark article. So I learned to review. And then I asked Nature, so Nature have a news and views section. I asked Nature whether they would like a news and views on this. And they very kindly said yes. So I wrote a news and views, which is a way of turning a scientific paper into something a bit more accessible for the scientific community. And then I thought, really, really naively, this may be the only time in my life when I know what's going to be in next week's Nature before it's published, and which is really stupid because all journalists have access, but I didn't know how these things work. So I wrote to newspaper editors saying, "I know what's going to be in next week's Nature, and I know the paper. Would you like an article on it?" And they must have laughed, but Clive Cookson, who was the scientific editor of the Financial Times, which is a big British newspaper, not a scientific newspaper, he said, "Look, I don't know who you are, and you've never written anything, but I want to give you a chance. So why don't you write 400 words, and if I like it, I'll publish it, and if I don't like it, we haven't lost. No one's lost anything." So I wrote him 400 words, and he liked it, and he published it. So my first newspaper article was published in the Financial Times, and then he sent me a check. And I
Oh,
was like, wow, this is amazing. So I could do this all the time. So he was very kind. He really helped me by giving me this opportunity. And then I could say I published in the Financial Times, and then I got more confident, and I published an article in the Times of London, and it was shortlisted for an award. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I did a lot of writing. I realized very quickly that even though he had sent me a check, I could never live off this. I couldn't be a freelancer. But I did. It got me over the barrier that I could write for a non-scientific audience. And so over my career, I've written enormous amount for for different audiences, taking very complicated science and turning it into either simplified for a scientist or simplified for a non-scientist. And so you've probably heard about the Malcolm Gladwell always talks about the 10,000 hour rule, about to be an expert at anything, you need to put in 10,000 hours. So I put in, as a scientist, I have put in thousands of hours as writing for different audiences with different types of deadlines. I used to have a blog where I would write a post every single day. So I learned to write quickly, and this has been very, very useful. It's very useful for writing grants. It's very useful for writing papers, recommendation letters, and I published a book. So as I published now 2 books for a broad audience. One is a series of, one's a dictionary, so I'm the editor. I didn't actually write it. The other one is about genetics for a popular audience. And again, it's this interface. It's about taking science and translating it into a language that's accessible. And so this doesn't come naturally to anyone. I put in my 10,000 hours, but it's 10,000 hours that were very well invested. So this is the other thing. I don't think you need to put in 10,000. I don't think you need to stop and put in 10,000 hours. I think you need to put in 10,000 hours during your whole career. So as a scientist, you do a lot of writing, and that's helped my teaching, and my teaching has helped my writing. So all this investment helps about talking to different audiences. And that's really that's one of the things that I like to do is translating science verbally and written for different audiences.
that's really amazing.
It's a long answer.
Yeah, that's amazing productivity. If you can be a university professor and publish books next to that. Actually, I started writing books recently, but I don't think I could ever do this next to having a university professorship and family.
The fantastic thing about academia is that you're incredibly free. So I did work for I worked for a year in business development in a research institute. So this was again an interface job, trying to help turn science into patents and trying to help turn those patents into contracts. And again, I used my science. I wasn't doing science, but I was using my science background, and I was translating between different. It was really interesting. But I worked at the time for someone who didn't give me the flexibility and independence that I had got used to in the lab, and I found this really, really difficult. So the wonderful thing about academia is you can do what you want when you want, as long as it gets done. So I have to teach at the right time, but I can teach whatever I want. And while I'm teaching, I think the other thing also is to invest in ways that help other things that you're doing. So when I'm teaching, I'm actually also thinking about the research in my lab. And when I'm doing the research in my lab and presenting at meetings, I'm also thinking about how I present for teaching. And the teaching is really fed into the book. And the second book that we've just published in French came out of an interdisciplinary research project. So things feed in all the time. But you're doing a lot of things. I'm also, you mentioned, I'm also, have a family and I do lots of things out of the lab, and that's really important. I draw and I paint, and that's really important to have all these things going on. It does make for a very busy life. But that's good. Who wants a quiet life? If you want a quiet, I always say to my students, if you want a quiet life, you want it easy, go and do something else. Yeah. If you choose this career, if you choose a career in science or as an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. No one chooses to be an entrepreneur because they want to have an easy life. So if you choose this, then you're going to do lots of things, and that's what makes you only have one journey through this life, right? So you want to make the most of everything. The only thing I is bad. So and you need to balance with family, sport. I just went running this morning. So thanks for having a late start so that I could get it running. So you need to get your balance, and everyone gets their balance. What I don't work, for example, I don't work weekends. I try to take a day off a week, and I think it's really important to take a day off a week, just disconnect. So I do that once a week, and then you have to accept that when you do lots of things, you don't do them all well. so I'm not I'm never as prepared as I could be to teach, and my research isn't all at in the journals that I would like it to be, and I'm not the best father in the world, so you don't do everything perfectly, but I do lots of things, and they all feed into each other. So my life isn't compartmentalized. It's a mixture.
Yeah, that's actually, but I think there is a big difference between being busy. So busy life and difficult life are two different concepts. So I feel that at the moment as an entrepreneur, I have busy life, but it's not a difficult life. So like for me, I think I have a bit different experience from yours. So my experience with academic life and with PhD was that my life was very difficult because my projects were blocked by people I was working with, and I was doing impossible projects, and I always had the ceiling effect, and I could not force through, and I didn't really feel I could express myself, and in many ways I felt I was uh, I felt like mentally oppressed in many ways. I didn't feel I could develop myself in the ways I wanted. So it was complicated because I had many different things to do, and indeed I had a lot of things to do, many different tasks and many different roles to play. But at the same time, it was difficult. I didn't really see any clear way of developing myself so that I can reach my potential. Whereas now I see it. So all these blockades disappeared, and I can just choose, like, take my own decisions. And even though I have a lot to do, I don't have that obstacles anymore. So I think there is a big difference between busy life and difficult life. So it can be busy but still easy, and that's
Yes.
what I experience now.
So several things. One is that I heard someone say the other day there's this sort of obsession with being busy, and that being busy isn't being productive. So we have a lot of people. I think people think it's important to show other people that they're busy. I actually, that's not why I'm busy. I'm not busy because I need to show people that I'm busy. I'm busy because I'm passionate about a lot of things, and I want to do a lot of things. I only have one life, and I want to do a lot of things, and I want to make a difference. So, so that's one thing. So it's not being. I don't think being busy. I don't think there's any value to being busy. I'm not impressed because someone's busy. I'm impressed because they're productive. And some of my colleagues, are extremely focused. And actually, this is the advice I've always got from my mentors: is you need to focus, because I'm all over the place, and I'm very lucky. I have a permanent position, so I can be all over the place, and that's my style, and that's my contribution. Other people are extremely focused. They might work on one protein or one gene all their life and do fantastic things, and other people might go from one to the other and do fantastic things. So everyone has their own style. The other thing is, you said, you said you did what I do and you didn't like it. This is really important. There is no answer. Everyone needs to find a way to do it, and I can't say science is the thing to do. I can say that I found it extremely stimulating. Probably because I haven't encountered what you encountered. I've been with people who I've had mentors, and this is really important to choose the people you work with. I've had mentors who I've had enormous respect for and continue, who have given me, who have understood, had the intelligence to understand that the more freedom they gave me, the better for them and for me. And that's the way I try to mentor. I try, if my mentees are listening, they're probably saying, he's not like that. He sounds so nice, but actually he's horrible in the lab. So I probably get it right some of the time and wrong some of the time. But I really do try in the lab and in the classroom and even at home to give freedom, because I think people need to feel lost and to feel that they can find the way themselves, and to feel that they're not blocked. So many things I do in my career, and even the relationship we're building around your the workshops and everything. I really try to help people fulfill their potential. I think, and I can have an amazing student who has amazing potential, or a student has very limited potential. It doesn't matter. The important thing is to give them the opportunity, the space, and the confidence to fulfill their potential. And that's really all that you can do professionally, and to not block. So I know people who block other people's careers. This is a horrible way to behave, and often people do leave science or academia just because they had a bad interaction. So of course, not everyone. Some people in academia, we have everything. We have nice people and horrible people. We have supportive mentors and horrible mentors. It's a community. We have everything. So a lot of people leave science because they had a bad experience. And often actually the people who stay is probably because they just got lucky, they had a good experience. But you do have to look carefully at the way you choose people. And you also, the world has changed. We now live in a post-Me Too world where we have encouraged people to say, that doesn't work for me. To find the courage to say, that's not why I'm here. So I want to be in academia, but I don't want to be treated like that. And to say, that's not the way to treat me. And the system is beginning to listen to those people who say, this is not acceptable. This is not the way to be treated. And that's just humanity. You need to be an honest person. You need to know that you did your best to help the people around you fulfill their potential.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, in my case, this decision I took was a very complex decision. It was not just because the difficult experiences during the PhD, but I think I always had that entrepreneurial soul. I just ignored it for a long time, and I think when I look back, there were some signs throughout my young life that I might be a company owner one day. I just didn't really listen to my intuition, and I think only now I see it clearly. So
Maybe you were scared.
maybe, and it's also, entrepreneurs is a minority. Like, I don't have any in my family, so, and many people have that problem, that even if they are talented for it, no one will tell them go set your own company, because they don't have anyone around them who would be their mentor and took that path before, who would tell them you can do it too.
I mean, it's the same thing in academia as well. So a lot of our students are the first people to do a PhD in their family, and I think that's very brave, because it's hard to explain to your family what a PhD is in this whole weird career structure.
Mm-hmm.
I was very lucky. So my life has been busy and complicated, but I've been very lucky, and I was lucky. My father was an academic, and he inspired me. And showed me that you can do this as a profession and still have a family and still, afford to buy a house and those things. So I had a role model at home, whereas a lot of my students are the first person to do a PhD in their family, and I think that's really brave. And as you say, if you don't have entrepreneurs around you, you need to be really brave to set up a company by yourself. So.
Yeah. And actually, I would like to refer to what you were saying before about your style of doing science versus some of your colleagues who are very focused. So actually, I'm currently working on a battery of aptitude tests to better help people decide where they should go on the job market. And I analyzed academia, and I came up with a few different ways to become a university professor successfully. And I think, as you said, professors also have their personal styles, and there are at least 3 different ways to get there. So some people are craftsmen, that's what you mentioned. So they are very focused and build a career very systematically around one topic. And some people are more like you, they are more of artists and they experiment a lot and they merge knowledge from different disciplines. And some projects will eventually work and some projects won't. But such people are also often successful because that's where true innovation comes from. It comes from experiments. So
I mean, you know, I think you do have to, in any research, in any career decision, you really have to know yourself, and you have to be convinced about where you fit in, and try not. So sometimes I'm jealous of those colleagues who are really focused because they publish these beautiful papers, and I'm impressed, and I think you know, if maybe I should just stop everything else and do that. But I think everyone makes a contribution in a different way. Some people make a contribution as being a parent, which is a very, you know, it's a great contribution to humanity, but it's not valued by all societies. And some people, you know, some people are writers and artists, and so I think, I mean, I have found, and I found it very late. So I became a teacher. I was already very advanced in my career. I was already, you know, 40 when I became a teacher, and I hadn't taught before formally. But I found, I discovered that teaching was just really satisfying for me, and I like balancing the teaching and the research. So and doing both. So my colleagues who do less teaching, they have more time for research, and I have colleagues who do more teaching, less time for research. I really like to find the balance of the two, and I always need new projects so the latest project you might have heard of is a podcast, and you would say, well, what is an academic who's doing teaching and all these things? Why is he doing a podcast? That doesn't make, like, what's the point? So the podcast is called The Lonely Pipette, and its byline is helping scientists do better science. And that's my career. I think whether it's in the lab or in the classroom or in the books, I have been committed for many years to helping scientists do better science. And that's my footprint, that's my contribution. Instead, I could have just done the best science I could in my lab. So we have tried to do the best science, and we try to publish in the best journals and make a contribution, but all the scientific contributions are very, very small. They're all tiny. Even the most successful, even the Nobel Prizes are making tiny, tiny contributions. So we've made a contribution in the lab, but the podcast is, so what is the podcast? The podcast is the idea that not everyone, just what you said before, not everyone gets lucky with the mentors they get. Yeah, some people end up in labs with people who are not great mentors. But there are some amazing mentors out there. How can we offer mentoring advice to people, to everyone, so for free, from people that you might never meet? So we've had scientists around the world, men and women in very different situations. Some just starting their lab, some are at the end of their career, some are directors of big institutes. And we just wanted people to have a chance to hear them as if you met them in a bar at a meeting, and hear not about their science, because the science you can read in papers and that's all published. We want to hear about the person, how they make decisions. And we wanted to ask them about things that they never talk about failures and about fears. And we want people to realize that these are just people like me, and that maybe there'll be something that will resonate and help me. Some of them have had, you know, very different careers and moved around a lot. Some haven't, and we just want to offer an archive of discussions with scientists about what it is to do science. Mm-hmm. And in the next season, we're also going to have some people who've left academia. So want to talk about that. We had the editor of Nature, so she's someone who started as a scientist and now is in publishing. For the next season, we have some other ideas about different types of. But it's not about careers. It's about mentoring. It's about listening to people who have succeeded and their failures, and hearing that a little bit like what we're trying to do here.
Okay.
It's called the Lonely Pipette.
The Lonely Pipette. Yes, guys, check it out, please. It will be linked under this episode. And can I ask you, for which scientist is Lonely Pipette? So what's the target audience?
So the target audience is life sciences for the moment, because the pipette is something that's used in labs. So my co-host was a student of mine. He's at the beginning of his career. He's very interested. He's just finished his PhD. He's very interested in science communication. I'm more towards the end of my career, and I've had, and so it's about people in the lab. The pipette is supposed to give people an idea about molecular biology. Most of the people we've interviewed so far are in the life sciences, but we're having people signing up from an amazing response on Twitter from all sorts of fields, and including the social sciences, and people have been asking me would I interview chemists and physicists, and so we may. I mean, we want to talk to anyone who has an interesting story to tell, and something that will inspire young people in whatever careers. So we've had people listening who are not scientists. They found it interesting to listen to scientists talk about their jobs. So, yeah.
Okay.
So the audience at the moment is basically PhD students, postdocs, and PIs, group leaders. And we hope that everyone will pick up something different from, their discussions. They're just a chat with a famous or not famous scientist.
Fantastic. Well, my experience is that sometimes you just have to do it for a certain amount of time to see the results. So like basically every single conversation is interesting. It's in its own way. But after a period of time of doing this, like I recorded over 30 episodes so far. So it's been over 30 hours of talking to very interesting people, and I can see patterns, but I can only see them after like 30 plus hours of talking. And I guess the more I do this, the more the wiser I will become. And I can see that there is some added value of doing such an initiative for a long time. And I already have
how long we have to see how long we keep it up. So we finished season 1, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is someone called Tim Ferriss, who just interviews interesting people, and his idea was that by just talking to people who have been successful in any field, he would be able to distill out some common aspects.
Exactly.
We're not quite there yet. So I thought it'd be interesting. So we asked some of the sort of questions he asked. We asked people for a morning routine. Like, is there something about how they structure the day? So there are things. We're gonna be creating a blog that will try to summarize some of these things, so that we distill out. And I think you're right. I think successful people, there are some common themes.
Actually, that's interesting. I mean, I would like to hear your opinion about the daily routine or a morning routine, because I heard urban legends that this is actually a myth. So in fact, there is no common pattern. So what is your opinion here?
So there is no common pattern. So one of the things that Tim Ferriss and Chase Jarvis and all that crowd of people, James Altucher, so a lot of these podcasters who are interviewing famous, successful people, one of the common themes, and I don't know, again, it could be a myth, is the idea of having a meditation practice, having some moment in the day, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, where just you have quiet personal time. And so I have a meditation practice. I try to have a few minutes every morning, just to meditate. And I think this is becoming very popular, but I think it is, I think that's really important. And that seems to be a common thread. So that's part of the mythology of morning practice. The other thing I do is, which is again, you hear on all these, is I do so I think it's important to have a gratitude practice. So every morning I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. So I didn't make this up, but I heard this and I thought it was interesting, and I do it every morning. I have a little notebook, and every morning I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I think gratitude is really important. So those are 2 things. So quiet time and gratitude. I don't think it matters, what you eat. So I get up in the morning and I drink half a liter of water, of cold water. I also take cold showers, because all these, I'm trying everything. I'm experimenting. So, and I think, sport is clearly important to have some kind of sport activity. So a lot of the people we've interviewed that, and I think for me, creative practice is really important. So to do something creative every day, it can be cooking, which I think is creative. It can be drawing, it can be photography. So I do that every day. I have a little bit of time for a creative practice, and I think creativity, gratitude, and time out are really, really important. And the other thing I think that we will see is to have something that creates balance in your life, whether it's family time or sports time or music, something that takes you out of the lab and gives you a balance. And that's the wonderful thing about being an enseignant-chercheur, a teacher, researcher, is that when you're teaching, you have to leave the research behind. There's no way you can teach and do something else at the same time. So this break, so it's not about sitting and doing nothing. It's just about breaking up the rhythm of the week. Mm-hmm. And so if you just have some time when you do something else, even if something else sounds as great, even if it's rock climbing, which sounds like more intense than but just to have, and that's what we're hearing actually. It's really interesting. The people interviewing most of them are really, really busy, but they all got something that they do that just takes them away. And that going away, and we're asking that sort of question. And that's what we're hearing. It's not about sitting down and doing nothing. It's about creating breaks and dynamics that allow you to go and come back. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. Everyone has their own. You have to disconnect. That's to reset your brain. I do it too. Maybe.
But I think in labs, in PhDs, for example, we don't say this enough. We don't say enough. You got to take the weekend off. So one of the best students I had, she never worked weekends. She was really, really productive, because when she was there, she was really working, and when she wasn't there, she was doing something else, and that's really healthy, I think. So
like human brain is like a computer. Like human brain is nothing else than a computer, and you have just to plug it out once in a while. Otherwise, it will get
reboot.
Indeed. Okay, and actually, I can tell you about one thing I noticed from talking to people who are really successful, which is, I think, not a secret. That's quite one thing that is known about successful people, that they tend to live abundant life, so they are not afraid of taking risks. I think it's also true about you, because you didn't mind to step out of academia without fears a few times, and every single time you were able to come back. And I think this is a fear that so living without this fear, what comes next, I think is very important. And many people have that fear, and they are like mind wondering if they should try careers outside academia, because they have this anxiety that they will never be able to come back. So my question for you would be, what would you advise to those people? Like, how would you encourage them to try?
So there's a lot of myth that the only way to do research in academia is to spend 24 hours a day and weekends in the lab and just do that. And this is not true. And that's one of the things we wanted to show with the podcast is these people who are, running institutes, they didn't decide they wanted to run an institute. They just were passionate about what they do and curious, and then opportunities came up and people pushed them to take on responsibilities, etc., etc. So when you look at other people's lives, they look so planned, and you think, oh, my life is such a mess, and everyone else's. But actually, everyone's life is a mess. The really important thing is to enjoy the journey. It's just the journey. You only get one way through, and there's no. I think in academia, and probably because from the early in your university training, we give you the idea that it's about getting a degree. So you go to university to get a degree. You don't go to university to get a degree, but that's the story we tell people. And then you go to graduate school to get a PhD. And so it gives this idea that there's a goal. But in life, there's no end goal, there's no pot of gold. It's just about enjoying the journey. So I don't think you go to university to get a degree. I think you go to university to have 3 years at university experimenting and exploring and working out who you are and who you like to interact with and what you want to do and how to make a contribution. And the same thing, everyone who goes to most people who start a PhD in biology finish a PhD, so they get a PhD. So once you sign up, you've already got the diploma. So it's not about the diploma. It's about what you do in between starting a PhD and finishing a PhD. And that's, I think once you have that, then it changes. So you mentioned Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs in one of his, I think it's the Stanford address, he says that you should look in the mirror every day and say, if this was the last, and it's poignant because he died so young. Look in the mirror and say, if this is the last day of my life, is this what I'd want to be doing? And that's really hard to do. But he said, if 3 days running the answer is no, then you should go and do something else. So in the times when I've looked in the mirror and said, is this what I want to do, in the last day of my life? When I found that it didn't work, that's what gave me the courage to go and look for something else. And actually on the day Steve Jobs died, I was teaching. And I said this to my students, if today was the last day of my life, I'd be thrilled to be spending it teaching epigenetics. So because that way you give a legacy, you've got something to give back, so that will exist beyond you. I think you shouldn't be scared, and you shouldn't look at other people's and think it looks so linear and simple. Nothing in life is linear and simple. And also, you don't know what's behind. So that's one of the questions we're asking about fears and failures. And what you discover is that all these famous people, their life is full of fears and failures, and they don't show it. It's not on their CV. There's not. And actually, one of the things he said in one of the podcasts, he said maybe you should have a section on your CV failures. In the lab, in the institute where I have, last Christmas, we had a competition to make a poster to sum up the year 2019, and each team made a poster. And I said to my team, why don't we make a poster with the failures of the year? Okay, all the experiments that didn't work, articles that we sent to editors and they came back. And so we made a poster, failures of 2019. And I think it's good to just admit there are failures and you learn from them. And you shouldn't think that everyone else's life is easy.
Right.
And then you have to, what we're trying to teach to young scientists is to have the courage to go and experiment. So, I mean, you're an example. You don't know quite where you're going, but you're out there doing stuff, and there'll be opportunities. Some of them will be successful, some of them won't. And that's what we trained you for. We trained you to be ready to approach anything. in an experimental way, in a test and try and measure, and that's it. And then you need a bit of luck, you know. But I always say the thing about luck. I think luck is great because if it wasn't for luck, then I wouldn't be a scientist because all my colleagues, they're much smarter than I am. Okay, so if it was just about intelligence, I wouldn't have survived. But lucky, I can be as lucky as they can be. So, so luck is good. Luck is great. It helps everyone, and it means that we're not on the. Life isn't about who's the smartest or who's the most beautiful. It's about who uses the skills that they have to enjoy the opportunities they get.
Yeah, actually, I don't personally. I think that you can foster luck. It's not that you can. Luck is a combination of network you have with your attitude and the way you interpret events. There are many things that happen to you that you can interpret as lucky or unlucky depending on how you look at them. So yeah, you can for instance say that you left academia for a year and it's quite unlucky because like in the end you didn't build your new career and you had to come back and you were like you had 1 year less in your university curriculum, so it's unlucky. Or you could say it's extremely lucky because you still found a job back in academia after a year. So it's the same events that you can interpret in different ways, and that's what is major contributor to whether or not you perceive yourself lucky as well.
I think I have been lucky. I think it's Mark Twain. My mum always used to quote, I believe in luck, but I find the harder I work, the luckier I am. And at the end of the day, it is about hard work. If you don't put in the work, you won't succeed. So you need to put in the work somewhere, but you need to realize that that you can benefit from all the work you put in before. So I'm sure now you're using things that you learned intuitively through your PhD, even though you're not using the neuroscience or whatever, but you're using things that you learn, skills that you learn that you're using now. Whatever you're doing now, you'll learn things that you'll be able to use wherever. I'm not sure where you're going, right? I think we've talked about this. I'm not sure where you're going, but that's what is exciting, right?
Yes, totally. I mean, I definitely use the same skills, and especially I think what is important when you start your own company is that learning this uh, accountancy of risks and rewards. So making a portfolio of projects and making sure that some of them are high risk, high reward type of projects, and some of them are more like low hanging fruit. And the rewards are proportional
But
to the
you also,
risk.
it is good to have that analysis, but there'll always be surprises. So you have to be always ready to readapt. So,
Right.
we talked about the writing. So I was really excited to be able to write for the Financial Times and the Times. But I realized that actually I could make more money writing for less prestigious. So actually I did a lot of writing for less high profile, but places that could pay for it. So it's you have to be willing to adapt when the opportunities come about, and that's what. So I gave a lecture yesterday to undergraduates, and obviously I like to encourage them to follow our master's program, and a lot of them don't come because they think it's only a program for research, and we're trying to make the argument to our students, but also to employers, that research is just a fantastic training for anything. Because researchers, they're not scared of the unknown, they're resourceful, they can adapt to surprises. So just we say in French, formation par la recherche, training by research, not necessarily for research. And so I think I think when you have some distance between you and your PhD, you realize that even though some of it might have been a bad experience, it just really helped you. You learned a lot. And sometimes it takes a few years to realize how much you learned during a PhD or from a research experience. Even when it's a bad research experience, you can still learn a lot from that.
Yeah, it's actually doesn't matter that much what happens to you during your PhD. It just matters what you do with this.
Yeah.
And actually, I totally agree with that. Even the most successful people have lots of failures, but it's actually something that is still a major difference between academic world and the business, I believe, because in academia, I think many things went wrong in academia in the last decade or two, but this is actually something that I like, that actually went well. That I think there is a increasing acceptance of, culture of sharing failure. But this is something that is still not present in business. So you're not really welcome to share your failures. I mean, everyone likes these stories of success. When Elon Musk is talking about the past, or other successful entrepreneurs are talking about the hard times in the past when they were almost broke. But these stories always only sound good in retrospect, in past tense.
There's a little bit of survivor bias
Yes,
mythology, right? That it's easy for Elon Musk, but how many people failed like Elon Musk and didn't become Elon Musk?
right.
Um,
But
so
yeah,
yeah, the thing about academia is it's rather unforgiving because the academic, the tenure track system, or the concours system in France, you really need to be at the right place at the right time. And it's so actually, I think business is more forgiving. And a lot of VC companies say that if an entrepreneur fails, that's a good sign. Whereas if you set up a lab and it doesn't work, it's really, really hard to survive. Um, so, or if if you get scooped, if someone else publishes before you, it's really hard to bounce back. So academia is relentlessly unforgiving. And also, you can be 60 years old, you still have to get money through a grant, you still have to have good ideas. So you never make it enough that you can relax. Whereas in business, if you make a lot of money, you've made a lot of money, right?
right.
so and you do hear, so we have these entrepreneurs who come, and you do hear that in the entrepreneurial culture that failing is more accepted. You can still get financed if you failed, whereas in science, if you fail, it's really hard to get money, and harder. It's a bit of a spiral down or a spiral up. So
Mm-hmm.
the more success you have, the more money you bring in, the more success. The more failure, the less money, the less. So it's tough.
Right. Although, I think there is a difference between talking to investors when you basically show them your whole curriculum and the projects you did before, and you can explain why they didn't work. But when you talk to the public and, to your potential clients, then you have to really appear successful. So what you
Yeah.
see, like when you see entrepreneurs on Twitter, on social media, in like public appearances, they always, even if they talk to investors and tell the truth, they still try to appear successful in the public. And this is also what my entrepreneurial friends told me, that you should not ever mention about if you have any doubts or hard times, just don't mention it on social media. That's what people don't want to hear from an entrepreneur. They want to see a leader, they want to see someone strong, they want to see
But
uh,
a good leader is someone who can admit when they made a bad mistake and change their opinion. I think that's really important. And someone who can admit that not everything works and not everything. I think you can. It's getting the right balance. But I think I hope we are creating a culture where people can talk about things that didn't work, and talk about their own fears. Yeah, else it's mythology, yeah, and personality cultures.
yeah, actually, I hope so. I just see that academia is already much farther with this development than business, and in business is still showing your weaknesses is like, especially if you have doubts of any kind, then it's still seen as a negative thing. So yeah, so I can see that asymmetry, that when I talk to academics, I can I can talk about my failures openly, but when I talk about my business to the public, I have to really keep the happy face, and just wipe the things that don't work under the carpet, thinking, okay, one day I write my biography down and I just list all these things, because 90% of all the things I'm trying don't work, of course, as with
And
every
people will
business.
say, "Oh, she's like Elon Musk."
And then I'm just recording, like I'm just writing down all the things that didn't work, thinking that one day I will make a story out of it. But for the moment, I just wipe them under the carpet because this is expected of me. So I can say, yeah, this is hard, for a lot of people I know in person even. This is hard. This is like a mental burden because you have to keep this persona online where everything works perfectly, and you can only share with your closest family and friends all the things that don't. And
Okay.
yeah.
It's a shame because when you share the things that don't work, then there's a collective learning, right?
But that's also the point. You don't want your competitors to learn that. That's
Ah,
that's why that's why business is different. Yeah. Um, all right. So, lastly, could I ask you, what type of life advice would you give to your kids? You have 5 kids, and I'm curious, how do you prepare them for adult life? Are they already adults, by the way?
yeah,
And
yeah. So two of them are at university. Um, so I have, yeah, my kids are quite different from me. I have encouraged them that they should really that they shouldn't go to university to get a degree, but they should follow things that they're passionate about and interested about, and that hasn't been easy for them because they've all started things and then changed to something else, which might be which might from the outside might look like they failed, and we encourage them because we can afford to. So financially, we supported them, and so they're very lucky there that they didn't have to worry about earning money yet. But we really wanted them to feel that they know why they're doing what they're doing, and if it wasn't right, that they should change. So my two oldest ones they're very talented, more talented than I am, but and they're very good academics. But they both of them started university and then changed to something else. Um, so, but you can't keep doing that. So I think we gave them the opportunity to change once, but we said to them, you can't keep changing every year because you really need to finish things. So I think that's important. You need to, if you're not in the right place, you need to have the courage to say, this is not the right place. I need to be somewhere else. But you need also to create a crack. And it's fine. You can do that once and 1 year on your CV. So this thing I have said to my kids, 1 year on your CV, you always find a way to, so they both present the year that they did something that they didn't finish. They present it in a positive way. So I've seen the way they present it in their letters, and they present it as if it was a plan, which it wasn't, but showing that they learned something from that year, even though it wasn't, they didn't finish what they started. Um, and then the second step was you can once you change, but then you need to finish. And even if it's not what you want to do for the rest of your life, you need to show that you did it well. So you need to show that you need to develop credentials that you can change, but also you can do things and finish them well. So that's what we're trying to encourage them. I'm also trying to encourage them to be at interface careers, so to use the skills that they have at the interface between fields, so between math and computing, or between engineering and biology. So that's what they're doing. And then and to encourage them not to worry too much what I'm going to be when I grow up, but just to enjoy growing up. So that's been part of it as well.
okay,
You have
fantastic.
to get them. You have to ask them what they think. But we've tried to. I mean, we're very lucky that they don't have to go out and get a job. So, many children in the world have to go out and get a job and can't have the luxury of asking what I want to do and what I want to study. So in the West, we're already massive privilege to be able to go to university and to have that time to explore. University is about exploring who you are. And that's what we've tried to encourage them to do, and to do it well, to show that as well as exploring, I got good grades, and the other thing that we really encouraged from a very young age was to have was to have internships in experience. So to do something in the summer. Sometimes they got paid for it, sometimes they didn't. But to use your parents' network, I think you shouldn't be embarrassed to using your parents' network. So we help them with the friends and network that we have find summer jobs, and we help them because we're quite international. We help them have international summer job experiences. So actually, all my kids, for example, my 3 big kids have all been to Australia for the summer. They did an exchange program. I've never been, but they. So and that opportunity, you know, when you're 14 and you go to Australia for a summer, that gives you amazing independence, and it makes your outlook to life very different, and makes your CV look different. So we've encouraged all of them to do something every summer, some kind of internship, different things. Maybe it was things they wanted to do or not, and to not be embarrassed about using our network to do that. And now they're using their own network to do that. So.
Okay. And lastly, perhaps some of the viewers would like to work with you in the future after seeing this episode. So in what ways can people contact you? And do you currently have any vacancies in your lab? As you're definitely a good mentor, so maybe perhaps there are people out there who would like to join your lab or some of your other initiatives. So how can they contact you?
So I'm easy to find. So you can find me on Twitter at Epigénétique in French. You can find the Lonely Pipette on Twitter at Lonely Pipette. If you just type my name, Weitzman and epigenetics, you find me. Be a little bit careful because I have a twin brother who's also a scientist. So if you want to go to his lab, he has a fantastic lab, but in the States. So do be careful. Some people got a little bit confused. And then we take people. So I again, what I do is I create opportunities for people to learn and to train. So those opportunities start at the master's level. So I created a fund that offers master's fellowships to foreigners coming to France. So the second year of our master's is in English. We have fellowships that are quite generous to come and study in France. Then I'm always looking for people in my lab. So my lab is called the Plasticity of Cellular Phenotypes. But anyway, it's easy to find if you just type my name into the Google. Or on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'm using LinkedIn a lot. We take PhD students often from the master's program. So the master's is the best way to get into a PhD program in France. And then I'm always looking for postdocs. That's inevitably. And then we're looking, so we just had someone who wrote to us and said, I want to be involved in the Lonely Pipette. And I said, look, I can't pay you because we don't have a budget yet. And she said, no, I just want to be involved in the project. So just, if you have ideas and you want to be involved in projects, whether it's in the lab, out of the lab, I'm always looking for interesting people to work with. And I'm always looking for ways to try and support people who are at the beginning of their careers. That's I'm towards the end now. So I just want to have that generosity to be able to help people. If you want to come and work in my lab, you must look at the papers we've written. I don't want letters from people who haven't read the papers I've written. And there's no point in coming to my lab because it's a lab or because it's epigenetics or because it's in Paris. You need to come to my lab because you like the questions we ask and the way we ask them. And the best way to see that is to read the papers we publish. So I like someone who comes to me and says, I read the paper you published and I really like that idea. And that's what I want to work on. And those contacts, I have a collaborator in Sudan. We've never met, but we met electronically. And I like something that he'd done and he liked something that we'd done, and we collaborated and we published a paper together. And so I want people who want to come and work on what we work on. So to tell you what we work on methylation, lysine methylation is an epigenetic mark in the context of cancer and in the context of host-parasite interactions. And this year we published a paper with a physicist and with a molecular biologist and with a parasitologist. So, and the projects we do in the lab depends who comes. So if someone comes and has fantastic bioinformatics skills, then we'll have a project for him. I don't impose the projects. You don't come to work for me, you come to work with me for you. So so you have to be excited about it. If you're not excited, go somewhere else. You need to never go to a lab unless you read the paper and you say, wow, that's what I want to work on. So you need to read my papers. In big journals and small journals, I've written a lot. And if you read them and you think, wow, that's what I want to, then write to me and tell me, I read your paper and it's wow, that's what I want to work on. And then come and work with us. So always a problem how to find money. This is always a problem. So the better your CV, the easier it'll be for you to find money.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
And I should say, if I don't reply, so you know this, Natalia, if I don't reply, just send me a second email. Yeah. So I need, we get too many emails. I don't reply to every single Twitter retweet. But as Natalia said, I'm doing too many things, but don't hesitate to. And that's the same with everyone. You need to be in this world. You need to distinguish yourself from the noise. And then there's a lot of noise out there. So you need to find some way to distinguish yourself from the noise. That personal. I gave a class yesterday to 100 students on Zoom, and one of the students said at the end, "I wrote to you and you didn't write back." She said in front of everyone. I said, "Write to me tonight, and I promise you I'll write back." So she wrote to me last night. So she just got herself noticed. So that email I replied to last night, even though I have lots of emails I haven't got around to replying to. So.
All right, great. So guys, if you are interested in working with Jonathan, you know where to find him. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us and for sharing all this wonderful advice. I'm sure that it was inspiring to lots of people, including me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I did all the talking, but if you're listening to this, you probably already a fan of Natalia. You have to support her work and her workshops and her book because she's out there being brave, doing lots of things. So.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. Okay, great. Thank you guys for watching and watching until the end of the episode. If you would like to get more of this type of content, please subscribe to this channel. And of course, also put your comments and questions in the comment section and we'll address all your questions. And thank you so much for watching and till